The last few days have seen a number of events that have culminated in the resignation of the finance minister, as well as the appointment of a new finance minister, Mr. Tito Mboweni. And all of this started after Mr. Nene went to give testimony at the Zondo Commission, where he admitted for the first time that it was not, he had met the Gupta family several times. He had actually visited them at their place, which is something he had not disclosed before. In fact, when he had been interviewed by ENCA, he had said that he had bumped into them 1 or 2 times, which meant effectively that he had lied about his interaction with the Gupta family. So he came up clean at the Zondo Commission, and a day later also issued a statement wherein he apologized for not meeting the Guptas at his office, but only meeting them at their family compound. He said nothing about the fact that he had lied, but we should assume that he was also referring to that when he apologized for his behavior and said he was only human, and he actually asked for forgiveness. It was actually quite a genuine sounding apology from the man. But actually what that did was to say, if this man actually issues a statement and admits to doing this, what should happen? Should he be allowed to keep his position, or should he be fired or be let go? And throughout the last few days, there has been speculation as to whether the President Cyril Ramaphosa will fire him or whether he will resign by himself. We as City Press had heard and had written in our newspaper that our sources had informed us that he was going to resign by himself, which ultimately is what did happen according to the President yesterday. He said he received a letter from Mr. Nene, who owned up to his behavior and offered to resign because he said he didn't want government work being distracted by issues around his meetings with the Gupta family. Now I need to stop right here and just say that it was quite a commendable act on his part, because in South Africa we don't really have that culture of political accountability where people firstly admit to wrongdoing, and secondly don't just stop there, also resign over mistakes that they have made. In South Africa we just don't see that. People want to hold on to office forever. So I think he actually has upped the standard for other politicians to say, when you have done something wrong, you need to own up, and secondly, don't just own up through your actions. So that is quite good of him. And there has been a debate as to whether or not whether he should have resigned, because other people have said so many other ministers have gone to the Gupta family. So if all of them are going to own up visiting the Gupta family, we won't have a cabinet left, because so many of them would have gone there. But actually, I think people there were genuinely being dishonest, because the issue was not whether or not he had met with them, but the issue was whether was the fact that he had lied when he had been asked about it before, and insisted that he had bumped into them on 1 or 2 occasions, when actually that was proved to be not the case through his own confession, by the way. So I think we have to accept it. The problem, I think, is that Mr. Nene has generally been seen as an honest minister. He was previously removed from this portfolio by President Jacob Zuma when he refused to sign the nuclear deal. And I think that act actually elevated his standing in society. He was seen as a man who had stood up for his principles, and South Africans were quite grateful that the country was never committed into a nuclear deal we could never afford. And I think that is the reason why a lot of people were a bit skeptical whether we should be sacrificing him. But I think, personally, I think it had to happen because the issue was not visiting the family. The issue was lying about it when asked about it. So I think, I don't know what his future will be, but I think he would have been seen to have fallen on his sword. And I think, there are other good acts like standing up to corruption that we'll remember him for. And then the second question has also been around the President Ramaphosa. Throughout the last few days, people were asking, what is he going to do? Is he going to fire the person? What should he do? He kept quiet for a while without committing himself to anything really, up until on Tuesday morning when we heard that there was going to be a press conference in the afternoon. Then we had a sense that if there was this press conference, it would mean that there had to have been a drastic decision taken, and which was proven to be the case when it was announced that Mr. Nene had left and a new person had been appointed. I think Mr. Ramaphosa is in a very difficult position. The economy is doing quite badly. We are almost teetering from one crisis to the other in terms of the economy. So he has to be very careful what he does. He has to be very careful about the message he sends to us as the populace of this country, to the international world, to possible investors, and actually to the markets as well. So I think he did well by not coming forward and saying anything, and actually only acting when we had to act. But what was interesting was the fact that he portrayed it as if he didn't actively push for Mr. Nene to resign. He merely had representations from Mr. Nene and had discussions with him, and then acceded to his request to resign. I don't think we can find fault with it. I think under the circumstances, something had to give, and Mr. Nene himself had said he didn't want to be the continual focus of the opposition parties and other people when the focus should be on developing strategies for the economy, and the finance portfolio is quite an important one. And actually there had already been threats from the EFF that if Mr. Nene did not resign, they were going to push him out. And I guess the president felt we could not afford that level of instability and uncertainty, and he allowed the situation to play itself out and to let Mr. Nene go. And then obviously the next question is whether or not he made the right appointment in going for Mr. Tito Mboweni. And I think the reaction so far, from what I've seen, has been quite positive, mainly because a lot of us feel that Mr. Mboweni is quite experienced. He was the previous Labour Minister at the start of the dispensation during the Mandela era, and he was also the Reserve Bank Governor, and he's also served in a number of international bodies. He's also chairman of several businesses. So there's a sense that he was the kind of the perfect choice. He knows what the issues are. He's actually dealt with them before, and there's nothing that will be a complete surprise. And he's also been in the ANC's National Executive Committee for the last 10 years or so. So he's been continually engaged in understanding what's happening inside the political party as well as inside the country. So I actually think it is a good move. Other people, of course, have questioned and said, did we have to recycle an old person like that? And the problem actually is that Mr. Mboweni himself brought this to himself when he tweeted the last time that he didn't want to come back to cabinet because he didn't want to be part of recycling all leaders. Now he has acceded to this, and people are asking what has changed. There's a feeling that you could have brought in a younger person. You are the president. You claim that you're coming up with a new dawn, but how come the new dawn is being implemented by old hands? Those are some of the comments that people have raised. But I think on the whole, people have said, you know what, we don't have the luxury to experiment and look for younger people that we can try out. Actually, the situation is at a crisis level, and you need someone who's dealt with this issue before, and we can be able to run with it without too much orientation. One of the issues, of course, is that in the next 2 weeks, the medium-term budget has to be presented, and I think by now it surely is complete, and Mr. Mboweni will add touches here and there, but he'll have to implement what is there. And actually, I think that the other reason in bringing an old hand is for me, that makes sense, is the fact that we actually don't know if he's going to stay beyond the elections, after the elections next year. So you just need a person who could stabilize, get the situation under control, and Mr. Ramaphosa can have the luxury of deciding whether or not he wants to keep him. So I think that was a good move there. People have also raised questions about Mr. Mboweni and his propensity to tweet whatever is on his mind. But I think there's a view that now that he's occupied this position, he'll be much more careful. And in fact, he has been advised to close his Twitter account, actually, so that he can display a much more serious and firm finance minister, as opposed to the guy who just had time to play around and tweet. An issue of concern as well has been the fact that we've now had our 5th finance minister in 5 years, in 3 years, since 2015 actually. Yeah, we've now had 5 finance ministers. It's actually not 5 as in 5 separate individuals, but we've changed them 5 times, because Pravin Gordhan has been removed and brought back twice. Nene, the same as well, and was also Des Van Rooyen, who served a mere 4 days before he was removed. I think that was really symptomatic of the incoherence under President Jacob Zuma. It was really a consequence of that, and those decisions had to be taken. It's unfortunate that it does send a message that that crucial portfolio is unstable, but I think the circumstances warranted it. Even now, it was a forced move after the testimony at the Zondo Commission, and there wasn't much else that could have been done. People have raised the fact that it's funny that previously we had a situation where we had one of the longest serving finance ministers in Tabane, but now we've moved to this 1 year, 2 years of finance ministers acting and then being removed. But I think it's symptomatic of generally the last 9 years that the country went through under President Zuma, and I'm confident that by next year, if the same government is still in power, we should be able to appoint a finance minister who will be able to stay in the portfolio for a long time.